that I just can't believe you know what I did is I hit the record button, but I'm supposed to hit the play button to initiate the recording again. That was my fault. So
my feet are sweaty.
I done fucked it up. I apologize.
You gave me sweaty feet.
This podcast contains adult language. For all of you listening, I handed the reins over to Kate, and she gave like a good, probably 3-minute rant on our next topic.
It was a wonderful monologue, okay?
It was, and I had forgotten to hit record.
So now my brilliance is just gone. Posterity can never, ever appreciate it.
It's out in the ether. So
privilege is bad.
So welcome back to the second part of the James Chambers Show. Okay, so we are going to talk about several forms of privilege. And do you want to hit the monologue again, or should we just?
I said a lot of words earlier, and Marshall kind of gave me this hand gesture, and it was all bad.
It was all downhill from there.
And all I remember was ranting about a conversation that I got into on a post on my friend's Facebook page, and how all of these people, when I'm trying to say, look, this is the definition of white privilege, everything that you are repeating back to me, that you are telling me is the exact definition of white privilege, but they could not actually extend themselves to embrace that idea. It was, well, yeah, if I, as a white guy, am pulled over as a drunk driver, I'm far less likely to go to jail. But that doesn't make me privileged. You're just jealous. It all came down to jealousy because they didn't work hard enough for something. No, motherfucker, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
You just literally defined white privilege, and you still cannot accept that is in fact a structure that benefits you and has your whole life.
Right.
And unless you do something to counteract it personally, because one of the people says, well, why do I have to reconcile myself with the actions of these people or this? It wasn't me. No, you are not responsible for all of those people. However, what are you doing to actively counteract all of the systemic racism and privilege that is, what is the word I'm looking for? It's right here, and I can't spit it out.
I would say pervasive. It's
pervasive is just as good. It's not the one I was thinking of, but just as good. And it is so pervasive to all of our systems. But you still cannot call it for what it is. Well, yeah, that happens, but they're just jealous. No. Stop being intellectually disingenuous, okay? I'm sorry that you are uncomfortable with the fact that the world is inequitable. The sooner that you accept that and do something to counteract that, then you will no longer be part of the problem. Sorry.
Fair enough.
End rant.
Well, and that's and to be clear, I had posted on this as well, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of, granted, X, then shouldn't we all be just reconcile it to the fact that we should be doing good for everybody? Isn't that a better proposal than worrying about, is it personally my fault, or did I personally benefit from it? If whether or not you did or didn't, then we should still be acting in a beneficial way to everybody, because that's just a good thing to do, and that benefits everybody.
And you are still actively participating in the system, whether or not you acknowledge your part in it.
Exactly. And that's kind of where I was trying to – I didn't want to get into it with – because I knew these people – I knew who they were.
That's okay.
And I didn't – I mean, most –
they were primarily my family.
Right. And I didn't know one or two of the people, but I figured based
who they
on –
were,
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we should step back just a smidge, and I want to – for the people who don't – okay, some people will probably need an actual reminder of what privilege means and not what the loaded term means. And so here's the definition of privilege. It's a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group of people. That's the short version. I personally prefer the long version, which is privilege is defined as a benefit or set of benefits that members of a certain social group have. These benefits are usually unearned and they are easy to be taken for granted when you have grown up as a member of a privileged social group.
Yes, you somehow perceive that it doesn't actually exist.
Absolutely. So think of privilege as being issues that you don't have to think about or worry about on a daily basis.
They're invisible issues.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are, unless you make a point to look at them.
And a lot of these are intangibles, and that's something that I'm going to point out with here in just a few minutes. See, and this is where I think it keyed into the discussion that you were having with your family, because this, in my estimation, after reading through the comments and kind of following it for a while, I think it boiled down a lot of it to this. Having privilege does not mean that you do not experience difficulty in life. However, you may have privilege because of one aspect of who you are, but you may also be denied privilege based on something else. Denial of privilege is called oppression, and chances are high that you have also experienced some form of oppression in your life. And the point that I wanted to kind of bring out was when I was reading through those comments, it's the first part there. It says, just because you have white privilege doesn't mean that you haven't had to work hard, or you haven't had difficulties, or you haven't been oppressed in other ways. There's not one type of privilege. White privilege is a type of privilege, but there's also socioeconomic privilege. There's also class privilege. There's all kinds of others, gender privilege. I mean, there's all kinds of different classes of it. And so being able to look at white privilege and say our society has a perpetual and systemic problem with the white group of people in this country having 2 steps forward in the race on everything. Because
at least 2 steps.
Right. But because of the way the country was founded. And that's because we have a systemic problem that we are still trying to fix. Because, oh my God, it's only been 60 years since, or 70 years since Jim Crow? I mean, at least when those rules were being rolled back, it's like we don't even have 3 generations of people from when we were fucking segregating schools. So to say that, well, none of that matters, we're done with that now, is a lie. And I think intellectual disingenuousness is part of the problem, is that because it falls into the same kind of thinking of, well, I didn't own slaves, therefore I don't have to pay any reparations. It's not on me. It's not my fault. Nobody is saying it is your personal fault. What you need to recognize is that
you benefited from the entire
system.
Structure of that system.
Exactly.
And you continue to do so. And the fact that you cannot see that
is part of white privilege.
It is the biggest part of it, because you don't see it, you don't believe it's there. However, you can see the inequity of how other people are treated. You just don't think it's wrong.
Right. Or
for whatever reason.
Or it's not your personal fault.
Well, right. You're not the one that did that to them. Other people are. It's the othering again.
Right.
It's other people are doing
I'm not racist. I have black friends.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I'm not fucking poor. I have rich friends. Yeah. Whatever.
It's the way that we need to approach these conversations that I find. And I think you did a very good job approaching this conversation. I think that, nobody was being hostile. There was a little escalation on certain people's parts, but there was nothing that was really out of bounds. At least not that I saw. Maybe something has changed, and I've had conversations like that with people where, and in fact, this is kind of where I was going with something. I was having a conversation sort of online on fucking Facebook again with somebody.
Cesspool.
God, it's awful, but we all use it because But my former supervisor, and he's an old school Midwestern guy. I mean, I love the man. He's a fantastic person, and he still holds some ideas that are antiquated, questionable in terms of society and where we are today. And I can't remember what the meme was. He posted some meme. He posts a lot of memes, which is fine. He's an older guy. I get it. It's totally cool. I do it too, but to a lesser degree because I'm a little younger. So
you have less time.
I have less time, right?
Yeah.
But it was something that was fairly, it's either going to be one of these 3 things. It's either going to be, the socialists are taking over the country, they're ruining your health care, or abortion is bad. And
there's nothing about guns?
Well, there was gun stuff too, but those are the big ones right at the moment. Abortion's the big one. It's always going to be about abortion. So I went in and I commented something about it, and I got into this back and forth with a friend of his who was interjecting onto the page, and it got to the point where I stopped reading the comments because I was like, in fact, I told him, I said, based on what you just said to me, which was kind of stupid and ignorant and a little shitty, I said, you just told me everything I need to know about you, and I'm not interested in continuing. So have a great night. Boom. And I left it. And he posted like 3 other things, and I haven't looked because it's
this is the friend's friend, right?
This is the friend's friend. And it's like that. It's that kind of interaction that doesn't benefit people in the long run, because all it's going to do is people retreat to their corners and say, I'm right, you're wrong, and that's it.
Well, it's all about owning somebody or something. I don't understand that. Like,
it was sending troops to the border. That's what it was about. I'm sorry. It was sending troops to the border.
And
I said that,
too.
Yeah, that's fucking stupid. But that's another topic because, that one, that's something else. But it had to do with like the Posse Comitatus Act and all this shit. And he was claiming that it doesn't exist anymore. And then I posted links saying, I proved it exists. It's right here. Here's a link. No. And he quotes something but doesn't link to anything or even tell me what the source is. And I'm like, dude, fucking tell me a source, because you can't just say shit and say that you're right.
But they can.
Well, I know, but it's not an argument. That's just...
Well, it is, because they said so. See, look, I can be a right-wing nut job too.
I know.
I mean, it's not hard.
It's not hard. It's just infuriating.
I know it is.
And I would rather somebody be wrong and source their material for their wrongness.
Right. I don't care what you say to me. If you think it's correct, give me your fucking sources. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry.
I'm willing to consider it now.
Right.
I will disagree probably.
I'm sorry, depending on what's behind that www.
Socialismisevil.org.
I may or may not, take it with a grain of salt or consider it a credible source. But the fact that you bothered at all.
Yes. Yeah.
To post something that might look credible. You're already halfway there in my, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
you're winning the battle there. I mean, not technically, but you're winning the intellectual.
And in all fairness, it's so easy for people to be duped by selective statistics.
Yes.
If you don't know how to read statistics, and I'm not saying that I am an expert on any part of it, but I do know that you can have biased statistics. You just zoom in on a certain part of whatever you're wanting to look at, and then make that your graph, and there you are.
And this happens all the time with climate change denial and with gun, murder rates and homicide rates. Like this is,
and they almost never cite their original source.
Right. And this happens constantly. And you're precisely right about how that happens, because it's so easy to just cherry pick data and then spread it as fact.
But your general layman doesn't know the difference because they don't know what the fuck they're looking at. It's a graph.
And they don't know how to frame the context. And that's the biggest thing that we've lost in all these conversations is the larger context. And so going to the conversation with your family, the context is, I think, what was off and was missing, not from your answers, but from their perspective.
Yes.
Because all of it revolved around, well, it ain't me, or I worked hard, so you should work hard, or I earned what I have, so therefore, Bob needs to earn what he has. And it's not about,
it's all merit-based. It's all your work ethic wasn't enough if it was, or, so-and-so would never, ever dare to quit. They would die before they failed. Nobody made this a referendum on this person's character.
Right. It has nothing to do with
that.
Right.
And I never called any one person by name or otherwise into question with, if I did, I certainly didn't mean to.
I don't remember seeing anything like that.
But that was not at all. No.
Right.
I'm not judging you for what you've got, whether or not it's ill-gotten gains. And I'm not saying that my brother's a robber baron or anything like that. But in all honesty, he is the poster child for white privilege.
He does have a monocle, so I don't know. He might be a robber baron.
I don't know if he has a monocle anymore, but he had a mullet for a really long time.
Yes, modern equivalent.
But he's inherited all of the family's land, wealth, all of that. Like, I mean, he's the poster child for white privilege, you know, generational wealth.
And that is
the automatic privileges being the white man. Like, there are situations that I've been with him at that had we been anybody else, we would have been arrested. Instead, we were just sent on our way because we were being jackass white kids.
Right.
You know?
It's interesting that you frame that, because there's some information I want to share here in a minute that goes exactly to that point. And before we get there, there's a website called Good Black News, which is very interesting. It's this particular woman who's the editor-in-chief is Lori Lakin Hutcherson, and she's an African-American woman, and she got tired of the sort of media narrative, the corporate media narrative of headlines being inconspicuously racist or diminutive, or sometimes out and out just disrespectful. And then a lot of the pictures of Black people that are with those headlines, in comparison to other ethnicities, tend to be disproportionately mugshot-ish or frowning or scowling, but they're very rarely happy, smiley pictures.
Right.
And so she started taking the actual text of the article without changing anything and finding a better picture of the person and altering the headline so that it was more positive in terms of, you know, the kinds of taking out those negative innuendos and putting in a good, reasonable headline. So she was trying to even the playing field in terms of that. So she developed this website that does that. And it's a very interesting website.
Sorry.
It's okay. But one of her friends emailed her, and this is a post that she did a while ago. And so people have probably heard some of this. I don't know if they've read it. It's rather lengthy. But a friend of hers emailed her and said, look, I'm constantly being told that I have white privilege, you know, and I'm a white guy, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. I'm not understanding what this is about. And there was a certain amount of confrontation in what he wrote, but I don't think it was defensive. It was that sort of defensive, angry posture, as opposed to just being offensively obnoxious. It was just like, look, how is this my fault? I'm tired of being told that it's my fault somehow. Can you explain it to me? And please just help me understand. And so she wrote this it's like 12 or 13 paragraph response that was directly related to her life. And so I just kind of want to read a couple of things I just excerpted from it. I'm not going to read her. If you want to read what she wrote, it's all on Good Black News by Lori Lakin Hutcherson. But some of the things that she noted is white privilege is being able to move into a quote-unquote nice neighborhood and be accepted and not harassed or made to feel unwelcome or prone to acts of vandalism or hostility. Being able to, as a Black family, being able to move to a, quote, nice, usually white community and not have to even think about the fact.
Your usually question is what you're looking for.
Yeah, and why are you there? And how did you get here? And that's a perfect example of the kind of privilege that they do not have. If you've never had a defining moment in your childhood or in your life where you realize your skin color alone makes other people hate you, you have white privilege. I mean, that's a pretty cut and dried example, but I mean, one thing I never think about when I walk into a store is the fact that most people would look at me and think, or don't think, that I'm going to steal something.
Right.
As opposed to walking into a bodega or whatever in a major metropolitan city and I'm a Black guy and first thing the shop owner says, I got to watch that guy, even if it's subconscious.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be an urban situation.
Right.
It's just as prevalent here.
Yeah, or a small Midwestern town, you know. If you've never been the only one, quote unquote, of your race in a class or at a party or at a job, and or it's been pointed out to you in a playful fashion by the authority figure in that situation, you have white privilege. You're the only Black person in class. You're the only woman in class, or whatever the case may be. I thought that was kind of interesting because it's something, again, I don't think about.
Right.
And one that I also thought, this one I've heard a lot. I've heard this a lot. And I always knew it was wrong, but it was kind of nice to hear it summed up in a nice way. If you've never been on the receiving end of the assumption that when you've achieved something, it's only because it was taken away from a white person who, quote, deserved it, you have white privilege. this the affirmative action argument.
Oh, yes.
You're stealing a spot from a good white kid who wanted to get into Harvard and who can't because this other kid who didn't really deserve it got in, and that other kid just happens to be black.
Well,
It's like,
but usually
or
their
maybe-
metric of deserving it is what their bank balance is,
right, and that
or their zip code they grew up in,
or are they what's the word I'm looking perpetual? No, the family has been going there. Legacy. They're legacy students. And so to assume that the black person didn't get in because they actually worked hard and did the right thing.
Like they are automatically undeserving.
Right.
Because the white person automatically, they have to be rousted from their seat.
That's like, again, a definition of what white privilege is. And that people don't – it's so hard for people to hear that and to understand it, that when you are used to being in a position of privilege, the fact that other people want it too begins to look like oppression.
Well, yeah. That's the whole Make America Great Again.
Yeah. You're right.
This really does all tie back together.
It does. No. All of these situations, going from everything we have on our show board here in the studio, this all ties together. Every episode of the show from way back when till today, other than like the hot sauce challenge, all ties into.
Wait for that BTF.
Oh man,
Dubs, not BTF. What is that? By the F.
W. Wait. By the way, BTW.
Well, I know, but I said F first, and I don't know why.
Okay, by the fucking way.
Right. Oh, that might have been it.
That's probably
Anyway,
it.
going on.
So this is something that I found the conversation interesting, and I think that was I really just want this section to try to grab white people by the hand and say, look, this is not about you personally. The only way this is about you personally is if you choose to not recognize it. And if you recognize it and you in your life actively attempt to level the field, help other people along, help your other fellow white people who don't like this idea that they have privilege, if you're trying to winnow that concept away, then you're doing the right thing. There's nothing you can do systematically until enough white people understand that particularly white men have the highest level of privilege in this country. And it's inequitable, and it's systemically oppressive to everybody else who's not a white male. Please.
Just as a side note, if you don't believe that white supremacy, and not supremacy, but white privilege is a thing.
Well, white supremacy does fit in that
well,
category.
it does. It ties in because, as I'm getting ready to say, there are studies that show that white people and black people, they can send in resumes that are identical, and you just change the names. And depending on how ethnic, quote unquote, how not white and Anglo-Saxon that name is, the less likely you are to get an interview. And it's not just because they can't say your name.
You know what's really interesting about that is, one, you're 100% correct, and I actually have a note about that because I was reading that. The sociologist Diva Pager, in 2009 found that a black job applicant for low-wage jobs received callback interviews or job offers at half the rate of equally well-qualified white applicants, and that black and Latino applicants with clean records fare no better than white applicants just released from prison. Mm-hmm. This is systemic.
Oh, there's no
systemic racism and privilege.
They're just jealous, though.
Right. They're just jealous, except for that giant fucking starting block.
Reason to be waiting.
Yeah. It's like starting a race with a nail in your foot. It's ridiculous. So I think another factor of this is that it infiltrates into class and it infiltrates into finances. And economic privilege is a huge problem in this country. And it will be until things start evening out and we get off this idea that somehow other people are less deserving, just as a fundamental character feature, that they're less deserving of wealth or less deserving of respect than you, or them or whatever, you know?
Yeah, whatever it is.
So 50 years ago, black upper-class Americans had incomes at about 2/3 those of white upper-class Americans. And while black middle class and those in the 60th percentile earned about 2/3 as much as their white counterpart. So, and those ratios actually are the same today. They've stayed the same for the last 50 years when we were supposedly advancing in race relations. The relatively affluent, by today's standards, African-American family from 50 years ago is still at only 2/3 the wealth that their white counterparts have. Mm-hmm. And that's... and they had graphs.
Oh, well, well.
It was actually, but it was a real graph, I swear. It was Washington Post, okay?
Oh, well, see, you've already gained credibility.
I know, yeah. So the median, this one I thought was kind of interesting too, was that the median white household had about 13 times the wealth of the median black household, or has about 13 times the wealth of the median black household. And with much of that wealth is transferred between generations. That's probably the biggest factor between the disparity between white and black Americans and their families is you have generational wealth. Even if you're not a quote-unquote wealthy family, what you pass down to your kids, be it just a house or land somewhere.
The remainders of your checking account or your investments that you had. Or any annuities that you had invested
401k
that you didn't have. Yeah. Any of that shit.
Right. And that's something that disproportionately white Americans tend to have that black Americans don't. And so again, this is class privilege and economic privilege all at once. Mm-hmm. And when you couple that with the other things of just being white or black, as we have discussed, those things all couple together in an oppressive form. And no, we don't have slavery unless you want to talk about the 13th Amendment, but we don't have equity either. We have a disparity between the fundamentals of being white or black. And to not recognize it is, or to be dismissive of it.
I'm not sure that you can address any of the other things. I don't know. I don't know if you have to address the racial inequalities first and the other things will sort themselves out, or if you have to address the other things but it seems to me that the racial aspect has to be addressed first because it's the one that actually branches out with all of its roots to all of these, whether or not they're poisonous. It depends on, what they're actually plugging into, but I think that's the thing you have to solve first. Everything else stems from that, I believe. Is
the racial component?
Yes. And I mean, not just the racial part of it, but I mean, that's primarily, yes, the racial, then the sexist, aspect of it. I mean, there needs to be a real reckoning of what it means to be created equal.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And I wish there was an easy way to approach this entire problem because it is a problem. And our national narrative is that, well, in some quarters, our national narrative is, we need to fix it. We can do it. Let's all come together. It'll be great. And in another corner, it's, that doesn't exist, and that's stupid, and you're stupid for believing it.
And I was caught in exactly that argument on the thread that I was on because it was, I am way book smarter than these people, blah, 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 blah.
I saw that comment.
And, they just want to fix things. Well, you know what? I just want to argue they just want to fix things. Well, you know what? This isn't one of those that there are like tangible activities that you can do other than educating other people who have this privilege and may not be aware of it. And if they are aware of it, don't give a fuck. And then you school them and hope that they give a fuck. Like, this is not an action-based item. This is the debate. This is the talking about and pointing out this really uncomfortable information that you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is the debate. And in that conversation, I thought that comment was particularly telling in that this person said that it was an interesting diminutive comment about himself, essentially saying, well, I know you're book smart and you're all smarty up there, But we down here, we're the ones
work
who
hard.
we work hard.
Rather. Right.
I've like you don't
somehow less deserving of whatever I might have.
Right. But but also it puts you're smart, so therefore, and it's like no.
Therefore, I'm incredible.
Right.
Discreditable. Incredible.
Sure.
Incredible.
It was an interesting way to frame the conversation in a way that's like. It's a backsided compliment.
Right.
Like, I mean, really? Thanks. That's kind of a dick move. But
I turned it right back around on him. I said, look, I really appreciate that you are an action, result-oriented kind of person, but this is how you get there. This is not an action item kind of thing.
Right.
This is discussion. This is educating the people who do not know about privilege, whomever you may be, whether you're a victim or a... What's the word? Benefactor. No, is that right?
Yeah, it works.
No, benefactor benefacts people, right? Benefactee? Anyway, you know what I mean. If you're making out okay with this.
Right, right. If you have been receiving benefits
benefactor.
of this.
It is never mind. Anyway, you'll look it up in post.
I will.
It's only a button, I know.
And I need a laptop in here. But yeah, this is that conversation that I think is important to have with our white friends, as well as I think that we probably have a lot to learn. Like, I think that we're a little more advanced on this issue than probably a lot of our families and a lot of our friends.
Privileged white people.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is,
as aware as I am of it, I know that I am not as aware as I need to be.
Absolutely. And that is where I'm at too, because I was thinking about this before the show. I was sitting at my computer and I was writing up notes and I was looking some stuff up online. And it struck me that I, as a middle-class white person, particularly middle-class white male, who is thinking about white privilege and privilege in general whilst working on a computer that's attached to a high-speed internet outside of the little studio that I built
in a very nice home, in a quaint little town,
exactly.
In a crazy little county.
In a really fucking weird state.
Yeah.
But this is, again, the definition of having socioeconomic and racial privilege is that I have the things to do the things that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And this show is one of those things I want to do. This makes no money for anybody and costs money for anybody who's involved, largely speaking. But it's something I want to do. And if I was a poorer Black person or Latino person or
even a
American
white person.
Indian or even just
if
a
you
poor
made
white
half
person.
Of what you made.
Yeah,
by yourself
or
whatever,
had a spouse who wasn't working or only worked a low-paying job because God knows her income is what really helps us float the boat. It's like it's that kind of socioeconomic privilege that I enjoy, and my family historically did not.
Right.
To be fair to all of my family, who some of us are struggling, some aren't, largely we're doing pretty well compared to where we started. Mm-hmm. But man, when we started, like, I used to think that, risotto was rice and tomato sauce. Like, we were dirt fucking poor.
Right.
And it took my mom and her husband at the time working all kinds of jobs, usually multiples. Sometimes my mom trying to go back to go to college for an associate's degree, ended up being a realtor at one point, trying to just pull whatever threads she could possibly do. And at the same time, my dad went from being because I split custody with my mom and my dad being a machinist and a tool and die maker. And so he was a shop steward union guy, and he had a good income. He was making great money until mechanization really hit in the 80s and mid-80s, and all those jobs went away, and he had nothing else to rely on. So all that great income just flopped. And by the time he passed away, he had nothing. I got nothing other than a few things that I wanted to have of his, but there was no financial benefit.
No insurance,
there was no insurance.
Residual checking account benefits, no savings, no retirement benefits, none of that.
And so the fact that our family, I feel incredibly lucky that my family has been able to fare as well as we have. My generation with my sisters, we're doing better than my parents did.
Well, and that's the hope that you have.
That's the hope. It is. But the big caveat there is that we had those 2 steps further in the race than a lot of other people did. And part of me kind of hurts a little bit about that, because it's like,
Did you really make it on your own kind of thing?
Yeah, but like we work, I take radiation dose every time I go to work.
Right.
Like,
no, I get it.
I literally, we're in life and death situations.
Yeah, no, I attempted a fucking nuke plant for 6 months, 5 months after I gave birth to my first child. And
Jeez.
It was,
Yeah. And it's there's some scariness about that. And there's also there's responsibility that goes along with, in my case, being a healthcare worker. And it's like, so I have to take pride in that. But at the same time, I have to look at that and think, God damn it, I did benefit from a system that allowed me to have access to these things more disparately than somebody who is of color. And
well, and like you said, it's not even necessarily, it is the primary detractors from this. You can't even call it like an equation, but like this whole grand scheme, it is primarily African American or Latino people.
And Native American.
And Native American. Yeah, people of color. Well, anybody that's not, Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the line. I think you're absolutely right, because it's like, it doesn't matter if you are a convicted murderer out on parole, you could probably get a better job than the dude that has a fucking parking ticket, but he's black.
Yeah.
And
that's
and
true.
that's one of the issues that I have with the whole background check system, because 1, how far back are you going? 2, how petty does this have to be? Because a misdemeanor to me, everybody breaks the law every goddamn day.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not they know that they're doing it and whether or not they care.
Right. And
but
and
everybody breaks the law. Now, is speeding as bad as, I don't know, embezzlement? No. No, it's not. There's a world of difference. But they're both crimes.
It's true.
Everybody breaks the law every day. So that kind of mentality of, well, you're a criminal, I'm not. No, sir. Or ma'am.
Right. You're exactly right, that everybody violates the law every day in almost a repeated form.
Whether or not they think about it that way or not, that's what happens.
Yeah, and so the gray scale of the legal ramifications is that's the whole legal system right there in a nutshell. Is that everybody breaks the law.
Should it follow you for the rest of your life?
Right.
Now, I don't know. My 13 parking tickets or speeding tickets, depending on, how bad they were, are probably not as bad as your manslaughter charge.
But
it's a matter of scale. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, it really does matter. But the fact is that the fact that you and I are both white, no matter what situation that those charges might be a possibility, we are almost 60% less likely, if not more, to not be charged.
Right.
Just because we're white.
And one thing about, and I am forced to reconcile with the idea that the way we should be dealing with things and the way that the law should apply and the way that people should feel about things is only what it is. It's a pipe dream. It's not real, And so people, if you want something, you should work harder or you should be able to have access. Well, yeah, you're starting from the premise that they can't.
Right.
Because they should. So therefore that means they
won't.
don't. Or they won't. And that's the core issue that we have to disassemble.
Well, they're
for
also
people.
making the assumption that everyone has the same connections that they do.
Right. And the same life experience. And I think
Right.
we've talked about this part before.
I
is
think
that,
so.
and
There's
this
a
is going back.
perception that your reality is everyone else's reality, and it's
Right.
not.
We had this conversation based on the progressive/conservative ideologies, and that liberals tend to be more sympathetic and compassion-based, whereas conservatives seem to be a little bit more pull yourself up by the bootstraps and it's your own damn fault.
Right,
And-
whether or not you have bootstraps or it's your fault.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I think we can probably wrap this part of the conversation up, but I think that we as white people
We have a reckoning to
We-
make. Well, those of us that are aware have a duty, in a way, I feel, to do what we can. I mean, don't beat your head against a brick wall. Stop reading the comments when you have to.
right.
But I feel like those of us that are aware of the situation and do not want it to perpetuate have a duty to, even if it is your family, bring up that argument. It doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. If they love you, they'll love you anyway afterwards, which I'm hoping, at least on this particular issue, is the case for me. But I couldn't have gone past it. I couldn't.
And I agree that that's one of those things that's hard sometimes to
I want to just love them and be like, you know what? But it's not. There's not a wall there.
right.
I came from these people. These people came from me.
There's a feeling of responsibility to help
and if
them.
and it's not saving them.
No.
It's not helping them per se. It is this truly how you feel? Like it is helping them, and is in the examining, is this really how you think or feel about this? Because I don't think people do that naturally.
Well, that's for sure. And I think that it becomes the question of, do you want to know as many true things as possible?
Well, I want to simplify it more than that. I think it's, are you comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Well, and those two things are hand in hand. If you want to know things that are true, then you have to be willing to examine things that are uncomfortable. Which is, I mean, and this goes back to, I don't know how many, a month or two ago now, whenever, that we were discussing atheism, and that's, you just in that argument or that idea, you have to be willing to challenge your assertions about
constantly,
like, life and the meaning of it, and what you think about in my case, the quasi-religious upbringing, and
to me, like, sorry to interrupt, but like a perfect example of that is, to me, is a miracle really a divine thing, or is it just something that I never truly believed in my heart could happen, and it did?
Or is it something that we just can't understand why it occurred?
But still, that's part of that. Like, is that really a divine thing? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, but this is. So to sort of recap, because I agree with your position, and I think that it is incumbent upon people who have an understanding of what privilege is in all of its various forms to learn more about it from people who are being subjected to it, and beyond that, to help our white brethren and sisters who are having a hard time grappling with the concept that they are beneficiaries of a systemic problem. And
just because you struggled doesn't mean you haven't benefited.
Exactly. And it's okay. You don't have to go find the first black person you see and hand them your wallet. You know what I mean?
Right. It's not a mutually exclusive deal.
Yeah. What you have to do is just recognize that it's there and work to fight against it. And that just most of the time is telling people and talking to people and trying to wrap your mind around the fact that, yes, you benefit in society.
And
you're a man, you benefit in society more than the woman did. If you're white, you benefit more than the black person did. If you're gay, you benefit less than a heterosexual person or a cisgendered person would.
Or even a female.
Yeah, or a female.
I mean, it really there is a hierarchy.
There is. It is,
and
there is a class-based system that can be applied to this.
Well, and that's the thing, is that it depends on how you're slicing it, because there's the There's the sexuality, there's the income, there's the, health, there's the all of these. You can split them however you want, but the main takeaway is that nobody wants to be a nobody.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are relegating people to the less thans and you're okay with that, like it's not even a concern, like, no, we're all equal because they at least have a job. Whether or not they're getting just minimum wage and that's all they'll ever have.
Right.
I mean, to some people that is equal opportunity. And I think that that's the bridges we should be burning down and trying to rebuild. Because it's wrong.
It fundamentally is wrong. I agree. And I think that's where we should leave this particular topic.
Yes, because I have to pee.
And we'll come back with the third half of the James Chambers Show.
Third half.
Oh, sheet. A towel. I have a towel on the banister out there for the express purpose of, in case one of my elderly cats decides to pee on the landing of the stairs, which has happened more times than I'd like to count. Thus the spray and the towel and clean it up. So it would double perfect duty for wine spillage.
I mean, thankfully I just had melted ice.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Now it's empty.
Now she just had melted ice. All right.
Oh, well.